Good, hello, and thanks for watching another Sunday case study. This Sunday, we're looking at the hand of George Soros. Soros. That'll do. Here he is. I've got a couple of images here. Not incredible, but you get the gist. And he is a practical and a sensual hand. Now, if you want to know what I mean by practical and sensual, please do look at my website on my blog, the 12 and classification method, and I have explained in full what I mean by those. Sensual hands are very personal, they're full of charisma, they are energetic in their ideas and their enthusiasm for life, the love of life, the pleasures in life, and they understand the nature of others and how best to get the most out of any kind of given social interaction. Practical hands are exactly as they say on the tin, really. They are firm but fair. They abide by the rules and look towards the more kind of logical, rational, reasonable, material endeavors and gains. So they are really often very good with their hands, but they are also um, very often seen in legislation, business, law, and they stand for order, practicality, essentially, sense and sensibility. So essentially, what this mix provides in a person is a material hedonist. And you can see that the palm is square. It's kind of flabby, very soft. There aren't any hard angles. The fingers are short and rounded, which provides a need to act in the moment. Highly instinctive. The fingers are also um, quite strong in width as well, strong personality, strong skills and talents. But it also creates a very sort of no-nonsense businessman, not someone that's going to surround himself with yes men. Someone who's very instinctive and needs the information right now. It's very difficult to say no to a person like this. Very often, when I look at hand, the thing that stands out most is that there's a reason for it, and it requires a bit of investigation. And it can often sort of pinpoint to, or it can be in itself, a very powerful clue. Palmistry essentially is looking at connecting circumstantial dots, circumstantial clues to provide a conclusion, an accurate conclusion, holistically. Now look at the Mount of Jupiter. It is of all the mounts in the palm, um, with the exception of outer Mars and of course Venus, as is so classically seen in sensual hands, very well developed. Jupiter is the place of authority, ego, ambition, but also graciousness, humility, being humble, idealism. There are pros and cons to all of our traits, really. And pride, ambition, idealism as well are at times potentially his downfall. These are sides to him which may well get him into trouble or be in some way kind of counterproductive towards his own aims. At the same time, he can be very humble and gracious and righteous as well, very righteous as well. And one of the things that really sort of struck me as well, that really stood out, is the short Jupiter finger, which we see so often in high achievers. Highly successful people often feel a sense of inadequacy by their every achievement. This is an inferiority complex compensated for by um, physical kind of coping mechanisms, satiating physical desires like eating or drinking, sex, and drug taking. Even these are physical coping mechanisms to compensate for this feeling of inadequacy, which is really sad. I see it so very often. So I believe that in his long life, he's 94 at present, at the time of this reading, he has likely compensated for this deep-seated feeling of inadequacy by these kind of physical measures. And the other thing that that really stood out to me was that Jupiter, although short, it shelters beneath Saturn his sense of right and wrong, which we can see is well developed by the heart line. Not only does its overall and kind of primary destination reach in between Jupiter and Saturn, It might be at times a little bit selfish, but overall, he is thinking about the bigger picture and trying to do what's right for others. And I know this because of the heart line reaching right over onto Jupiter, which is a clear sign of um, an idealistic nature. It's a sign of a philanthropist, a very charitable person. And you can see it a bit more clearly here, reaching right over onto Jupiter. You can kind of see it here in this image as well, although it's not all that clear. In any case, Apollo and Jupiter kind of lean in on, rely on all Saturnian qualities. Essentially, Georges Mouchery would have said he is a Saturnian. His need and his values in planning, sense and sensibility, ethics, right and wrong, the inevitable ambition, career, and practical values, traditional values. These are all inherently very strong. And in fact, his Jupiterian and Apollonian qualities really borrow from his strong sense of traditional values. And the other thing I've noticed about his finger leadings here, the finger lengths as well, a person with a short Jupiter in conjunction with a long Apollo finger is a gambler. It's a sign of a gambler. Now, when I say a gambler, quite often people immediately assume I'm talking about finances. And certainly in his case, I am talking about finances. But most often, more often than not, when I say gambling, it could either be with health, we could be overtaking unsafely on the road because we're impatient, we're gambling, or it could be matters of the heart. We jump into a relationship too quickly with someone, giving all of ourselves without question. This is gambling with the heart, wearing our heart on our sleeve as well. But in this case, this is much more financial. As I've mentioned, he is a practical hand. We're talking about more material endeavors and ideals, values. A person with a square palm is generally very sort of material and grounded, logical, reason has strong reasoning and practical. They are in their thinking. There has to be some sort of practical endeavor, aim. So the long Apollo finger really stands for that need to succeed, reputation and glory, the win, really. So when we see these two, a long Apollo and a short Jupiter, this is a sign of a gambler. Now, he would be a bad gambler if we saw the lifeline completely detached from the headline. But in fact, they are joined. They're closely tied, which means that he is cautious, but he's not overcautious. If he were overcautious, we would see these lines connected for a greater amount of time, right up until sort of 25 or so. That would be a real overcaution and in fact a lacking of confidence as well, an inability to jump on the opportunities when they arise. And actually what we see here is a perfect combination of caution and um, that ability to leap on those opportunities. And that's because of the short fingers, because of the rounded nature, that quickness of thinking, of action, instinct. And instinct is often is also enhanced by this tremendous Ring of Solomon. Not only does he have a very keen instincts, intuition, but he has an ability to sort of learn and understand the esoteric arts, and I wonder if he has and does. I mean, I haven't seen anything of an intuition line in his hand, which would see sort of curving around on Luna, reaching up onto Mercury, but these images really are quite poor. Mercury stands upright, it's long. He is highly intelligent with the length of the headline and Mercury finger. It's straight. That's the overall message here, is that his ability to communicate and express is not crooked. I'm not seeing anything crooked about his nature per se. But that's not to say that we can't do bad things. Sometimes, even in our best, obviously good people can do bad things. Sometimes it's inadvertent. If he is putting his money in the wrong place, if he is aligning with supposedly or should be good people like MI6 or CIA. These organizations should be working for the greater good, but they quite often don't. And this is where he might go wrong in uh, getting to bed with the wrong people and aligning himself with the wrong people, putting his money in the wrong places. The other thing I notice about his hand, just as a general observation, is the lack of gaps between the fingers. You can see one, two there, but overall, this is someone who it holds on to his money. He won't let go. He won't spend his money unwisely. I mentioned about instinct and intuition before, and there are one or two signs of this in his hand. If you look at this image just here, you can just about see that the Jupiter finger, it kind of tapers into something, it's quite thin at the tip. And that I think is fairly unusual for this sort of hand, these combination of hand types. And it shows a real, a powerful, perceptive nature. So it's kind of backing up this instinctive intuition. His thumb is quite long, is medium to low set. As I say, he's neither selfish nor overly giving. But the really interesting thing about his thumb is just how balanced it is. This is what's actually this picture's best for, is just the thumb analysis. Look at the overall length of logic and willpower is completely balanced, as well as the width, the overall width. I mean, it's such a strong thumb. This is a strong achiever, a strong personality, but not overbearing, not over dominating. This is certainly not someone who is weak, neither all too, tyrannical and dominating. It's impossible, really, to get away from his perspective and opinion because it's just so measured and so logical. This is someone who will always be heard in the room because he's likely known for his completely measured and rational approach to all situations. He's neither a pushover nor a bully, and he will almost always be heard. And the other thing is, notice how the thumb kind of tapers into something of a fine tip. This is a sign of someone with refined tastes. He is a big spender, so he's going to spend his money cautiously, but when he does, he spends it big. Now, the fate line, this was something that was really, for me, it was a little bit of a mystery. We're moving on now from the chirognomy into the chirology, the study of the lines in the hands. It was a little bit of a mystery to me because I'm looking at someone who is an investor, someone in finances, in business. And I'm seeing the kind of fate line that you see on the hands of actors, writers, people who are in the public eye, who care about their audience, so to speak. They want to make a difference. They want to influence and impact the world with their work through their purpose and their path in life. This shows the story, this fate line, of a person who feels very strongly about their purpose and is intent on making a difference. His fate line stems from Luna and reaches right up onto the Saturn mount. Now, Luna, the moon, it has an effect on us that is completely outside of our control. It waxes and wanes, so too does a person's financial life. It is out of their control when their fate line stems from this. Essentially, it is in the hands of others. Fate line that rises from the lunar mount and rises up towards Saturn like this is often seen on the hands of people who benefit from the opposite sex. George Soros has been said to give away actually most of his money to charitable organizations, and he has allegedly funded Georgia's First Lady's SOCO Foundation, which um, upholds the rights of women's reproductive rights. Now, there are two times in his fate line which really show a time of struggle in his life, and that is in his I would say, mid-20s and late 30s. It's really hard to see by this image alone. And I have been looking, I've been taking notes before this, and I don't know what occurred for him in his mid 20s there, but in his late 30s, he lost his father to terminal illness. Now, if you look at the headline after this time, you can see it changing course. We can perhaps see the headline's course better in this image. Now, notice how the headline is actually it's driving towards a very sort of level-headed outlook. Um, Actually, a very kind of black and white outlook, very rational, very logical. Actually, sort of slightly blinkered even. A little too black and white. And then after a certain time, there's a certain sort of shift, and you can see the headline begin to plummet towards the direction of lunar imagination, fantasy, even dark thoughts, dark thinking, unrealistic thoughts. And this is a sign of potential depression at this time. But the headline then levels out. So really, what we have is um, at the time of his father passing, his fate line in conjunction with his headline show complete perception shift in terms of his outlook and potential mental health. Now, a headline that reaches this far across the palm is actually one of the signs of fame in palmistry, and is, I would say, a borderline Sydney line, and is it's seen in the hands of people who are quite obsessive. A strong need to control is, as I've mentioned, already seen in the wide and the kind of basal phalanges, which is always seen in sensual hands. That need to satiate physically, which, as I say, is probably in a vast enjoyer of food. But there's a need to control physically his environment and how things are being run. His decision making is immensely um, important because it affects the lives of many, and this is also seen in a headline that's this long. His headline drives towards outer Mars, which is very well developed, as I've mentioned. It's the place of mental fortitude, resistance. He has a kind of fortress around his mind. He's able to withstand mentally to such a great degree. He is resistant. He is also a planner. That's also seen and noted by the way the fingers lean in and rely on his Saturnian qualities. But outer Mars is the place of strategy and planning, of acquiring for the future. It's about security and structure. It's a place of tactics. And so, all of the skills we see here, this um, ability to act quickly, instinctively, intuitively, to plan and think ahead, almost, in fact, to see ahead. He's able to um, just know what's going to happen, it seems. As I've said, I've not seen an intuition line, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw this on a hand print. Don't see anything of one here, but he has many of the other signs of someone who is able to kind of almost foresee events and at least plan and strategize. Now, the other thing that's really noteworthy here is that the headline reaching into outer Mars, also what comes from outer Mars is this sun line. And I want to mention this last because for me, this is the cherry on the cake. And it certainly ties in with other things I've mentioned and outer Mars. Now, the heart line for me is kind of an odd one because it doesn't start all that low down on the hand. Um, and it shifts, it kind of goes upwards and then settles and then rises upwards into a healthy destination, thankfully. And there is some forking up onto the Mount of Jupiter, which again is high idealism. So what we really see by this is someone whose emotional framework has been rocked by certain events in life. This is not someone who is going to fall prey to you know the sad story of a homeless person on the street. the experiences, the things that this person has gone through has hardened him and his approach to how he sees the world. At the same time, he does wish to impact in a way that he knows best, and that is through physical effort and endeavors, through action. That's his love language. He's not someone who's sentimental. He's not going to write poetry to his lover. He's not going to be romantic. The way in which he expresses his love is through showing up, is through action, and spending time and effort on a person, and obviously, most importantly to him, money. And that is because when we look at the results of the Mercury line here, it culminates, and you can't even really even see it before this, but it culminates in money line, and it's strengthened by the heart line, and it shows just how much it shows his thoughts and feelings about money. And in some way, I think he equates gifting money, giving physically, to love. Money is love to him in some way. That's his love language. Now, his sun line, as I've mentioned, it comes from outer Mars. Look at the sheer force this sun line. It goes through. It travels across, such a vast distance to reach its destination. It comes from here and ends up over here. This is quite unusual, and it shows someone who is, again, often this is seen on the hands of people who are involved in the literary world, creatives. And it's a surefire sign of success if it is seen on the hand of a writer. But what it really shows us is an aggressive, almost brutish approach to towards achieving, towards success. This is someone who would stop and has stopped at nothing to make ends meet, to strive to better things, to create opportunities, to search for them, and to pounce on them, and to make the most of every opportunity against all the odds. Also, he owes his success likely to no one but himself. And at times, I think he has probably been quite brutal, and as you do have to be in business. Practical hands they generally abide by the law. The law does not do what is right, though. There's a big difference between right and wrong and the law. So this is neither a person who is necessarily good nor bad. I think he wants to do good. I think his heart's in the right place. But who is he aligned with? The CIA and MI6 and George Soros funded a conference which sought to support the outer regions of Russia and have looked to, in some way, potentially propel and exacerbate um, ongoing conflicts around Russia in the lead up towards the Ukraine-Russian war. And it kind of looks like as though the West is influencing Russian politics and has done for a long time, and George Soros may well be part of this. Whether or not he has been um, manipulated or if he is aligned with this, I don't know. I just don't know. But I have read a few things that are sort of questionable in terms of his actions and where he's putting his money. I think from what I see here, actually, what I see is an honest person, someone who's essentially good. But with great power comes great responsibility. And it's very, very difficult when you've got this much money to make sure that it lands in the right hands. So I'm going to leave you with this really interesting fact because, as I say, this chap is 94. I mean, we're not really doing a reading on his future here because his future, it's not. I mean, he's 94. How many more years is he going to live? I can't say, especially with this clarity, and I wouldn't really like to anyway. But his sunline, notice how the strength of it is remarkable after this age. And this is at the age of, I would put this down to early 60s. And in 1992, George Soros is most famous for this event, which really it aligns with, corroborates with this exact time where we see the sunline really exploding into depth and productivity, prosperousness. Is that even a word? In 1992, he bet against the British pound and made $1 billion in one day. And this is what he's most famous for. And then in a couple of years later, his mother died. And this we can see, impact on him by the way this kind of diagonal line cuts through and looks to impact on this success. The sun line is not only financial success, certainly is for this person, but also it is an indicator of our overall happiness and joy in life. Now, for this person, certainly money provides freedom and joy, but also it doesn't mean anything unless we have our health and our loved ones. I think another indication of the impact, actually environmentally and even physically, on the loss of his mother can be seen elsewhere on his hand. Now, this is a loyalty line that comes in, reaches from the family ring here, and kind of looks to influence the lifeline. And you can see the change, the shift in which a way a person changes their life. Essentially, this is so impactful on his life that it changes the way in which he lives. And he was said to have made a speech about how he had offered to help his mother commit suicide. She was part of the Hemlock Society, the right to commit suicide, essentially, the right to die advocacy society, or something like that. So we can see really how this is, really impacted on his life in such a tremendous way at this time. And that is actually everything I think I'm going to say on this. I mean, I feel a little bit sort of conflicted about my overall opinion on this chap because actually I don't really have much of one. I didn't have any one before today because I know nothing about this chap other than the scant things I've read up online today about him, purely because of what I've seen in his hands. So essentially, like I say, I feel like he is a good person at heart, but his where he places his efforts is where he needs to be most careful, who he's aligning with, where his money lands up in the hands of. That's what's really important here. So let me know what your thoughts are on this reading. Perhaps you've seen something that I haven't mentioned. Perhaps you completely disagree with what I've mentioned. Perhaps you've got some facts that you'd like to drop in the comments about George Soros that I don't know. Perhaps he's not called George Soros at all and it's Soros. I don't know. I'm sorry. If you would like me to read your palms, please do email me. You can check out my website, piscespalmist.com, and book a reading there. And thank you very much for watching. Please do subscribe, and I will see you next Sunday. Please do recommend anyone at all you'd like me to read the hands of for next Sunday. And if you've got any clear images of said celebrities, please do email me them as well, because I often find it very difficult to find clear images, particularly in this reading. So this is why it was fairly vague. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.